This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Gentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 214 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Dan Heims of Terra Nova Nurseries about coral bells, heuchera species. The plant profile is on Mexican sunflower, Tithonia species, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events and this week's garden tasks in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on the tale of Rosie from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Dan Heims. He is one of the owners, correct, of Terra Nova Nurseries in Canby, Oregon. Welcome, Dan.
That is correct, and that is me.
Great to have you on. So you're one of the few guests outside of the Mid-Atlantic area that we've had on the GardenDC podcast, Dan. So welcome from the West Coast.
Well, thank you.
So we'd like to ask our guests here on the GardenDC podcast, were they born with chlorophyll in their veins and a green thumb?
I was born to a family. My mom loved to garden, and I did help her. My dad forced me to prune all the hedges around the house, which I didn't like. And we had a rock garden, an extensive rock garden around our house, which was unusual for a 60s house. It's when it was built in the early 60s. But it was on an acre of land, and my friends and I used to go out and explore nature. There were streams. We pulled out microscopes. We checked out pond water. I mean, we were just little naturalists. And it really didn't, other than growing certain other vegetables during my hippie high school days, it was going into college freshman year. I bought a purple velvet plant, a Heuchera, for 29 cents at Hiron's drugstore, and it flowered for me. And I said, well, what do I do next? So I got a great book called All About Houseplants by Montague Free, and it opened my eyes to the whole world of peperomias, begonias, and I was smitten. And let's say by the end of that first term, my entire dorm room from one end of the window to the other was filled with plants.
And did you have a college roommate at that time besides the plants?
I did, but he was mostly gone, so he didn't care.
And from there, did you pursue a degree in horticulture or botany or any related field?
I started out in marine biology and was informed that I would not be joining the crew of Jacques Cousteau. And so I fell back to biochemistry, which about finishing my second term, it was just too much. And I fell back on one of the other things. I used to do filmmaking back in high school. I mean, this is Spielberg's time with 16 millimeter cameras and sound. And that was very unusual, but it was a field I liked. I loved journalism. I loved writing. And so I selected communications, journalism, specializing in broadcast communication. And as far as horticulture, we have one of the best landscape architecture programs in the country. And I took every single LA class I could. I took every botany class I could. I got adept in taxonomy. Of course, I was teacher's pet. And one of the best things was my professor was just wild about tropical plants, had a huge greenhouse full of unusual things. And I had moved to a house, 1906 arts and crafts home, 6-bedroom, and it had a huge basement, and that was my bedroom. So I could just partition areas off for banks of fluorescent lights and plants. I had a South African garden right next to my bed. It was the length of my bed with lithops and Hayworthia, gasterias. I was doing a business selling to houseplant stores, which were pretty darn common, kind of like it is today. And so graduated. You can say I minored in horticulture, but the communication work was a nice touch. It really helped me in my life. So what else did I do? Oh, yeah. I was placed in charge of the landscape architecture greenhouse. Mm-hmm. So having access to this greenhouse, I could do anything I wanted. I had mist benches for propagation. It was just a great place to hang out. And graduated, was it 75? And I had a business going called Exotic Plants Unlimited. Set up a greenhouse at my folks' place using railroad ties and a beater oil furnace of all things and plastic. And by God, I had a greenhouse and did other plants indoors. We had a bomb shelter, which worked for growing other plants. And that was my business for a while.
Wow. And what did you go on to from there?
Well, in the 80s, the plant boom just dropped like a lead weight. That's the me generation. And people had no time for plants. So my market just disappeared and I fell back on my landscaping. I'd done some work for the Multnomah County here. And I was a pretty adept pruner and started my business, Terra Green Landscape Company. And we did construction, irrigation, full installation of gardens. And I would be designing them all along and did that for 20 years. And it's a good background. You really learn what plants grow well, what to look for in a plant when I'm buying it. I'm working on a book right now that's reflecting all my experience from that time. And it's called Plants That Pay the Rent. If you're a horticulturist, you get that immediately. Because there are a lot of plants that do not pay the rent. And so 3 years before I was done with landscaping, and I was feeling it in my bones, as you do after about 20 years of that work. Saw that somebody had, I was really into hostas. I started breeding hostas around that time. And saw a guy who had a Patriot plant. And these were $100 for a single eye. That was just crazy.
Yeah.
And he had a whole bank of them. And I said, "Oh my God." And he says, "Yeah, I got a tissue culture lab." And that's all I needed. And eventually found my business partner, Ken Brown. And we worked together 3 years doing 2 jobs, 16-hour days for 3 years until we could break out and make Terra Nova a real company. And the rest is history. We've introduced 1,300 new plants to horticulture. My goal was originally 801.
Wow.
Ask me why, Kathy.
Why 801 specifically?
Because Luther Burbank, my hero, had done 800 plants for horticulture, and he had the current record. And no nursery in the world has achieved our level. It's a big bragging point. And so we've become this big nursery. We're on about 15 acres right now. 5 acres is research. We have a big tissue culture laboratory. We can do just over 8.5 million plants a year out of there. And then internationally, we've developed a network where we're doing 25.5 million plants per year.
Wow.
So,
so many of our listeners, you most assuredly probably have Terra Nova plants in your garden from Terra Nova Nursery. Can you name some of the more popular, or maybe for especially mid-Atlantic area gardeners that we might be growing from Terra Nova?
Oh, the heucheras, of course, and are in a lot of gardens. We've done a lot of work with Brunnera, Pulmonaria. I was personally responsible for getting Pulmonaria that didn't mildew. That used to be the story. As a company, we have to look at a plant. Let's take the poker plant, for example. The Kniphofia, that's another, what everybody calls Kniphofia, or Tritoma. And we said, what's wrong with this plant? Number one, it doesn't bloom very long. 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, a year. The foliage was strappy and floppy. If there was a big windstorm, it would just rip and shred. So the base would look horrible. The flowers would suffer, and they'd only be in bloom for 2 weeks. So I do a lot of traveling and had this really ugly Kniphofia, and it had very few flowers, but it never stopped flowering. And as a breeder, I have a jigsaw puzzle, and there is sometimes a piece missing, and I found that piece. And that's how we came up, and it had really nice foliage, really grassy and upright. And I brought other varieties into it. We have virtually every color with the Popsicle series, the Poco series, and we came up with a grassy plant that is nearly always in bloom. So by approaching these, by having these breeding goals, we create a plant that is better for the grower, better for the home gardener, and looks great in the garden. So that's one example.
So let's talk a little bit about where you garden and maybe soil conditions, zone, any challenges you have as far as deer or anything like that.
Biggest challenge in my garden, probably squirrels. They're just a pain in the butt. And I have a gardening helper who likes to put out 5 pounds of peanuts a day, and they have to bury them somewhere. So let's just say I got a few peanuts growing in my garden right now. They go nuts. No deer pressure at all in our area. The summers get hot. We were in the hundreds for a number of days this year, and we had that big heat event where it got to 116, and that really messed up the garden. Heucheras made it through just beautifully. They did super well. And we also hit -2 this winter with a wind chill, 70-mile-an-hour wind and a wind chill of -2. And that's really rough. We're spoiled. We're zone 8. So we get to grow a lot of marginal plants, but also a lot of stuff from New Zealand and South Africa.
Yeah, I always think of your part of Oregon as being fairly protected. But yeah, the negative -0 doesn't sound so great.
Yeah. And last summer we had a day where it was humid. It was really weird. One whole day.
And that will test the plants.
I'm rubbing it in. No, we have test. We have test gardens all around.
Come and visit our humidity sometime if you'd like a sauna. So let's turn to the topic of the show, which is Heuchera. And first, let's talk about how we're pronouncing it, because as I'm sure you have, I've heard Heuchera, 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 every which way.
You hit the one that's my button.
Yes.
There is no chair in it.
Yes.
So what you have to know about a plant name is quite often Linnaeus had friends, and Johannes von Heucher was an Austrian and friend. He's a doctor, but also a botanist and a buddy of Linnaeus. So Linnaeus named this family after him, and you use the name as it sounds in the country that he's from. So it's Heucher. Germans don't usually do a hard K sound. It's like Heuchera. So that's, if I'm over there, I say Heuchera over the puddle. When I come home, it's Heuchera. because Americans cannot pronounce umlauts.
We'll start with the basics of heuchera, and that is, where are they native to and what type of growing conditions they prefer.
It's interesting, and if we had all the time in the world, we do have all the time. No, they are all North American, and they're, all the nativists are very happy with heucheras, and they say if they're a hybrid, they're not a native plant anymore. And I contest that greatly, because there's populations of heuchera that overlap each other. And you look at the plants right in between, and they have characteristics of both parents. So they're naturally hybridizing. Bees are doing the job. And is that plant not native? You tell me.
Well, I would agree. Yeah, especially in naturally occurring crosses or cultivars.
Yeah. And there's varieties that you've probably never heard of, like Perryi, and that are just up in the mountains of Colorado and just living in cracks. And then you can go to the Gulf Coast for Heuchera villosa, which has huge velvety leaves and tolerates full sun. This is like Southern Comfort, if you ever grow that one. And it's especially adapted well for hot, humid weather. I've seen them growing in cracks in the rocks, in full flower, in a 1-inch crack, and which is, these big floppy leaves. It's very surprising. And then Americana, we've got about 5 species that we use in our breeding. Americana is another East Coast native, again, humidity tolerant, but it can grow in the shade. So that'd be like green spice, and a lot of the silvers can take quite a bit of shade. And but the ones that back to the mountains had very small leaves. They're only about 1 inch across. So we have all this breeding potential for all these different sizes of leaves. You have these villosa leaves. Some of our hybrids have leaves that are 11, 12 inches across. They're huge. We call those the Grande series. And then we have the more compact ones. We have a city series like Hollywood and Tokyo. We've got a lot of plants. And obsidian is in every landscape architect's specs, even though I think we have much better blacks with better flowers, like black taffeta is one of my favorites, and that has villosa in it. So people can get onto our website, and we actually mention the species that are used in our plants, so we can classify them as, being the perfect one for the South. I've been in DC. I've got friends there, some family in Virginia, and I've heard some good reports on heuchera. So it seems to take that heat humidity. And I know you're hot.
Yes, and we had several days of 104 this past summer, and the heuchera never missed a beat, and they were blooming as much as they ever have, not just the foliage, which looks great almost year round, but the flowering itself is very nice.
Yeah. And the fact that they do so well in containers. And if there's a trend, it's containers. It's been a trend for probably 15 years, but it's just getting more and more the way people are getting forced into apartments. And it's something you can put on your balcony, enjoy year round with evergreen foliage, great flowers. They're great for the pollinators. In fact, the other day I saw a hummingbird fly right between 2 fuchsias to go to the heuchera that was in the middle. I said, and I was going, score! That's hilarious.
That's unusual. I've never seen a hummingbird on mine, but I do grow the heucheras in hanging pots in part shade under my gazebo. I have them all year round. Like, I don't even put them away for the winter. I just leave them in those pots. And I do notice that they excel in containers that are specifically either concrete, like our hypertufa containers, or stone carved containers. And when you talked earlier about finding the native species growing in cracks in the mountains of Colorado, that kind of tips me in a little bit into the conditions that they like a lot.
Yeah, I would say if I were to leave this conversation with one word, it's drainage.
Mm.
Heucheras have to have drainage. The second anybody mentions, well, I put it in my clay soil, and I said, they're dead now, aren't they? And they go, yeah, what am I supposed to do? The ones I had in pots are doing great. So I said, just raise them up, get some stones, bring in some really, porous soil and put them in the soil. And you may notice that some of the varieties get what we call long necks.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a long branch, thick, succulent branch. And varieties like that are natives to areas where they get nearly completely covered with leaves every year. And they grow through the leaves, and any leaf that's in contact with those stems, it roots into those. But we're so tidy as a culture that we clear out all the leaves that protect them. And of course, there'd be more winter damage, but you don't get the necks. So feel free to bring it. The easy way is just to sort of mound a little potting soil on, and you can break off the necks and just stick them in the ground, and they will root. Sometimes you'll see roots on them.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is I've seen a few kind of, as you say, a long neck sticking out of the soil, and I always wonder, can I treat this like a succulent that's kind of stretched out and snap it off and put it back in and see if it would reroot? So that's perfect.
Yeah, it does that. And again, drainage, and even the commercial potting soils can get pretty dense. So if you have some perlite around or pumice, I don't like vermiculite. I think it just stays too wet, and you should have success.
Do you recommend things like chicken grit or the poultry grit that can be amended to the soil?
Sure, anything.
And so that could work well. And that also probably explains what we see in the Mid-Atlantic during the winter time. I'll go around maybe at the end of January, and some of the heuchera that are planted in the ground will have heaved out a couple inches.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. And I guess mulching would help a bit with that, would it not?
Mm-hmm. Usually I'll just try to very gently press them back down and then add some more leaf mulch around their base. But sometimes they're sticking out so much that you almost want to replant them.
Yeah. And I like to feed them real early spring. I mean, we're talking February, just sort of as the snow is melting. Because when you're a gardener, you're in the soil, and you have to be sensitive to the amount of root growth. Like hellebores right now are throwing a crap ton of roots out there. And this is when I fertilize my hellebores. If you fertilize them while they're in flower, they go out of flower within a week. It just sort of burns them down. I find that the timing of fertilizer is one of the most critical things I work with in my own garden. My garden is a laboratory.
I would say that's a great tip. So heucheras should be fertilized with, what do you use?
Since they're a foliage plant, the price of fertilizer has just gotten extreme. I mean, what I used to pay $18 for is like $54 anymore. So I use some pretty strong stuff. It's a 25-5-10. It has 4% iron, which they always appreciate. And it goes a long way. And the best thing is it's slow release. So it lasts 3 to 4 months. And I just sprinkle probably a tablespoon around the plant. If you've ever looked at a nursery container, you've seen these little green pellets.
Yep.
That's more of an osmocote type, which is a fabulous fertilizer. I really like it. Again, you might do a little bit more osmocote. But you just want that big push in spring. And that's also a good time to divide heuchera. A lot of people say, well, it's a patented plant. I really can't touch it. We don't mind that you divide plants or even give it to a friend, but just don't sell them. That's the only thing. It costs costs us close to $1 million a year to do the research and development on these plants. We're talking growing 150,000 heuchera a year as seedlings and whittling that down to about 5 that we introduce. But they're really special.
Mm-hmm. And I think we'll get into some of those particular varieties and special ones in a minute. GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at turbotax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at turbotax.com/beatyourprice.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf, and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
But just summing up some of the care tips, when you get, I'll call them crunchy leaves, especially when they're in containers, spilling over the edge, and you just pluck them off whenever you see them.
Yeah, they peel off real nicely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't cut the leaf and leave the petiole because that looks bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you just grab that stem and rip it. So, just yesterday I was doing this to some on my deck because they're so obvious, but the oldest leaves are kind of they're like half crisp,
Exactly.
I'll say. And they're off color, but it's cooling down. It's beautiful weather right now. We're going to get 72 today. Just nice day to be in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just sort of do a peel. And in spring, you can just tear that plant apart and place them around the garden. And just every piece should root, as long as you got good garden soil and drainage.
Mm-hmm. And drainage. And
in case I didn't mention it.
And the other thing that needs a little cleanup usually on the heuchera is those spent wands of flowers. So once they drop their flowers off.
And I sort of hold the base of the plant. So my hand is on the top of the plant, holding it in sort of in a stranglehold with my left hand. With my right hand, I get every flower stem, and then I just sort of do a circular motion, pull with a circular motion, and they just pop off beautifully. I can do it in 3 seconds. And so that's as far as the flower is concerned. And again, some of our plants are reblooming. Mm-hmm. So you'll get a fresh new bush if they're one of those types. But, I was saying, I just encourage people to come to our website, which is www.terranovanurseries.com. And I love our website. And it's just, there's so much information in there.
Yes. Lots of great tips. And I love that tip about grabbing those spent wands all at once, because I just tend to finger prune. Like when I see one that's spent, I'll just snap it off at the base. And if it's not ready to snap off, it doesn't come off.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it'll stay there until it is. But obviously, you could go around with a pair of snips or pruners, and if you didn't like the sight of those. So I'm sitting here with the gorgeous Terra Nova Nurseries catalog in my lap, and there is I'll just call him a very flowerful astronaut. Standing on the surface. And I was like, at first when I was looking at the catalog, I was like, what does an astronaut have to do with plants? And then I realized, oh, your name is Terra Nova. Duh.
And we were, as far I was behind our catalogs for many years. I'm still involved in them. Do a lot of copy and editing and photography. But AI came around, and it's a tool. It's remarkable. In this particular one, we were able to input our pictures of our plants and spawn AI out of them. So we say, let's put an astronaut on a field with heucheras and something else, and it sort of made a hybrid of a heuchera on that planet. And they're sort of growing all over them. But if you look at some of the planets, those are forever purple. It took the texture of a forever purple leaf and put it on the planet. But it's just a tool, and it caught your eye, did it not?
It did. And I will say it almost looks like digitalis and heuchera combined. The plants on the cover. Somehow. A stretched out heuchera is what we'll call it.
Yeah. So, but no, it was just fun. It's fun to have a theme in the catalog. And in the catalog, which is also downloadable online, we show a lot of container suggestions and plants all over the world, really, and how the Chinese who were working with one of the biggest public display companies in Beijing will use 35,000 heucheras with one of their sculptures.
Wow.
These are essentially a green wall, but it's just a big kitty cat or something like that. But we like the numbers, and it puts on quite a show, and you have such a palette with heucheras. You go back 30 years, and we had Heuchera sanguinea, just the regular coral bell, which bloomed for maybe 3-4 weeks and was a nice addition to the garden, but just quiet. And name another heuchera from 30 years ago, Kathy. This is a test.
I would say
Come
there's Micrantha, but Richardsonia, but I don't remember them being in the trade really.
No. You're mentioning good species, but no, there was like Palace Purple.
I was going to say there's Palace Purple, not Plum Pudding wasn't 30 years ago.
No.
But yeah.
So, there were only a couple, but I, as a plant breeder, saw incredible possibilities in this family. The more I researched, the more species I found. Our most recent addition for our Northern Exposure group, which could probably do Zone 3, was found just outside the Arctic Circle. And you had mentioned it, the Richardsonii, and you don't get cold tolerance better than that. The craziest thing is we bred our colors and everything into the species, or brought that species in. So the plants are extremely hardy, but we tried them in Florida, in Miami, in Costa summer trials, and it was the only heuchera that's ever done well there. They all usually just melt into a pile. So that was a big surprise. Heat and cold.
That's great to hear that. Oop, that was my kitty Fancy chiming in that she loves heuchera too. So I don't know if she was picked up on the microphone. So I'm looking through the catalog, and it is, as you said, an amazing array of colors. So everything from, bright sunset, peachy oranges, yellows, all the way through to that deep, deep black purple. And of course, many of the burgundies and kind of mottled colors in between. And then there's the silver sheens to the leaves. So what I love so much about heuchera is when the wind hits it, the difference between the front and the back of the leaf. It's amazing, those color combinations.
Yeah, a lot of them have purple on the back, so you have some sort of contrast. The oranges, where we've done plantings of the oranges that come Halloween, they do amazingly well. And the purples are just the flip side of the color wheel. So plants like Forever Purple. So you got a kitty cat. Do you know what their favorite color is?
I'm going to guess red or green.
No.
No?
Purple.
Purple. Well, that's
Sorry.
my favorite color. Favorite color as well. But yes,
had to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I'm looking at your Forever Purple, which is one of your top sellers marked here, and that is just beautiful. But it almost again tends towards almost that blackberry side of the red, the end of the spectrum. And
then another one that does well I would think it'd do well in the DC area because of the large. Well, we tested it at J.C. Ralston, and it's called Heuchera Grande Amethyst. That's my favorite of that group. And these are gigantic leaves. I mean, you can put them they're almost the size of hosta leaves.
Yeah, I was thinking they would make a really good combination alongside hosta and maybe Japanese hakone grass with that chartreuse color to contrast with them. But yeah, amethyst looks great.
Hakone Cloa.
Oh, Hakone Cloa.
Yeah, another well mispronounced name.
Yes, exactly. So this Grande series, you said you were trialing in North Carolina with the heat and humidity of J.C. Ralston. So again, if it does well there, it's going to do pretty good throughout the Mid-Atlantic climate. And we did mention squirrels and deer and other creatures earlier. So I've found that any of the heuchera that have villosa in their background have a kind of that hairy texture to the leaf. Makes them a bit more deer resistant.
Yeah, that's why the pulmonaria do so well. They're very deer resistant because of that fuzzier leaf. I have to say it's not a pleasant fuzzy. It's sort of a scratchy fuzzy. But if it's bad on their tongues, they don't eat it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
At least one of the things. So let's talk about some of your personal favorite heucheras.
Oh, well, forever.
Make you choose.
Actually, some of my. God, let's look at the top 5, maybe. One that Chuck bred is out of marmalade called Zipper, and it just has the sharpest edges of any leaf, and it's just such a warm orange. I just love the heck out of it. Forever Purple, because it is, and the Forever Red is really, really, really growing on me. It's just so outstanding in the garden. We have a new one called Ruby Tuesday. That's one of those color changing ones. It starts out almost a peachy orange, real crisp, real tight foliage, and really perfect flowers. And the leaves will turn almost a chocolate purple to put a color on it. And let's see, we got Champagne. I don't know if you've ever grown that one, but that's a love. And of all the Northern Exposure series, there's a number of colors. I got to put my finger on Sienna and Amber. And when the amber comes up in spring, it's a mound of orange, but the new growth comes up right along the bottom. So it makes a ring around it. And that new growth is like a brick red. It's a two-tone effect that I just really love. And then there's the cuties. Oh, I've gone past 5, haven't I? Lime marmalade for a bright chartreuse. You got to keep most of those out of the sun, but that's been a very popular one. Really good vigor. And for a silver, that you'd want to do in just a bit of shade is glitter. And it does such a great, long-lasting flower and beautiful silvered leaves. Has those really dark veins in those. And there's so many new ones. Black taffeta is probably my favorite black. Large, not giant, but large black leaves of just the most perfect ruffle. You just gotta love them.
Excellent. I would say.
And wait, one more. Black forest cake.
Oh, now you're making me hungry.
Black with red flowers.
Oh yeah,
the combination is killer. Monrovia picked that up in a heartbeat. And they're producing that right now. When Monrovias are one of our best customers, and they're picky about what plants they select. And then GMs, Dicentra. We had one Dicentra that bloomed its head off in 104. That's the Dicentra amori, and that thing is nearly always in flower. Beautiful, clean white flowers. Amori white. I got a lot of plants, and then there's heucherellas, which are the hybrids, and some people, like in the Northwest, get a rust on their heucheras on the backs of the leaves. It's an orange rust, if I can say it. This is because conditions have to be absolutely perfect. It has to be 50 degrees, cold, humid for weeks, which we'll have. And the heucherellas do not get this at all. And the northern exposure ones are also really resistant. But the heucherellas supply a different niche. It's a heuchera crossed with a tiarella. And we have ones that just make clumps, like tapestry and solar eclipse. And then we have ones that run. And when they run, if there's any moist soil, they'll root in it. So they're actually a ground cover. And that's like Redstone Falls is one of those. They're just beautiful. And you get the red centers with the yellow leaves, like Alabama Sunrise. These all take humidity very well, too. Mm-hmm. Good heat. Copper Cascade, wonderful trailer. These will work in hanging baskets, too. They'll just trail right over the edge.
Yeah, and I will say that heuchera in general, but again, the heucherella you mentioned are fabulous ground cover choices.
If you ever go to Pierce's Woods at Longwood, there's a place where they put in, I believe it was 10,000 tiarella. And so you are just in this sea of tiarella. They have a bench in the middle of it, and it's mixed with phlox and some heucheras. But wow, that is just the most incredible feeling to be in there. And the fragrance. Do you ever get stuck when you were a little kid? You had to get dad a gift and you had like 99 cents. And you bought him the cheapest cologne, which at the time was High Karate. It was 99 cents. And it sort of has that smell to it. Just cheap men's cologne.
That'll bring back a lot of memories for people, I think.
It does.
I'm not sure if they still make that, but I'm guessing no. And I was going to say for my part, my two favorites, I think, from your line are definitely Georgia Peach.
Oh, excellent plant.
And that is heat and humidity tolerant. It's just like a doer.
A deer resistant, because it's got the fuzzy leaves, yeah.
And does so well. And then I think, and because love both those, the edible names, it's going back to Berry Smoothie would probably be my other top favorite.
That's a beauty, absolutely. That won it was like number 5 in the Chelsea top 10, so it actually got a trophy. Chelsea Flower Show tests like 104 plants. Then they get a top 10 out of there. And it did that well. Berry Smoothie did. So it got a trophy.
Yeah. Great to get a trophy. It does also have great heat and humidity tolerance and deer resistant because it's got that little fuzziness to leaves. But it's almost metallic. The leaf, but it doesn't really have a silver sheen. So it's kind of like, I guess you would look at it like copper is a good explanation of what it looks like.
Yeah. Those metallics came from Heuchera americana. So you're getting 2 East Coast species that are bringing that color in.
Hmm. And so where can listeners source some of your plants? Would they be going to their local independent garden center, ordering them straight off your website?
Well, it may surprise you, but for many years, Home Depot chased us. They wanted our plants, and I said, I am not interested. It debases a plant to be in your store. And because they're just not cared for, and you guys fight us for the lowest royalty, and we don't want that. We sell premium plants. We got to get our price. And after about 6 years, they just said, okay, we'll pay you their price. And we said, fine. And from plants we were selling 30,000 a year, it went to 1 million plants a year. That the box store appeal became real, and they're good, strong plants. So don't be surprised to find them at Home Depot. But we sell, a lot goes to independent garden centers. That's going to be your best. And please, please spend your money at independent garden centers, especially the specialty nurseries. I just saw Annie's Annuals went out of business. They're unfortunately a dying breed, or they've gone totally to mail order, which is my other suggestion. But these people do so much to expand our the number of genera, the number of species, the number of hybrids. And when they're gone, and you'll only get what Home Depot will dump out. I mean, I appreciate what they do for our sales, but Monrovia features a lot of our plants. That's going to be a very good source. But we sell to Quality in Pennsylvania. They distribute all up and down the coast.
And that's Quality Greenhouses?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're a great supplier of our local independent garden centers.
Yeah. And that's just one of many we deal with.
And for listeners, is the best way to contact you through your website, or is there a better way to do so?
Oh, they can just email me. I'm easy. So it's Dan at terranovanurseries.com. And Think Plants is another big distributor that's nationwide. And the other thing to do is to ask. You see something that's cool, you see something on our website, just ask the owner of these nurseries, hey, look at this really cool plant. Can't you guys order this? And if they don't listen to their customers, they're losing something. So just ask. You're powerful.
Good advice, Dan. And any final tips for maybe the first time heuchera grower in their home garden? They've maybe just bought a new home and they're looking at the garden and thinking, where should I put this plant?
Did I mention drainage? When I did my landscape construction, I put money into the soil. And so often with the subdivisions here, they may have been beautiful soil, but they bulldoze it off. And you are just left with subsoil that is just crap. And just start bringing in organic matter and working it in. And, I'm still from the tiller school, but also mineral amendments like pumice, like you mentioned turkey grit. And all these will lighten up clay. Use gypsum, which bonds with the clay and creates larger particles. And that helps with drainage. Try to do plants in raised beds. It takes just a moderate number of stones to contain a long mound. And you'll find everything appreciates a little bit of drainage. And it doesn't have to be huge. It can be 12 inches high, even 6 inches high, but just not in wet subsoil. Plants they have to breathe. Oxygen is as important as water to plants. And that's a connection they need to get. As far as a new homeowner, you don't have to get big plants. The heucheras will grow very quickly. So a 4-inch pot's ideal if you can find them. Gallons are great. Plant them a little bit higher in the soil, like an inch higher. So that root ball it's almost like a periscope. for adding a little extra air. And then you can mulch it, but it's got that little periscope to bring oxygen into the roots. Do them in masses. They look just amazing in masses. And do a little research, come to the website and study them and find out what their parentage is. So you're not making a mistake. That's kind of what my new book will be doing.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see that new book. And I will, for my part, say that heucheras are like potato chips. You can't just have one.
I like that.
Yeah, once you start, you'll be adding different ones and collecting, and then I have to have this one. So yeah, get on that Terra Nova website and you'll be in for a treat.
Yeah, they're doing that in Europe now. People send me pictures. This is my heuchera collection. And It's like hostas, but they do so well over there. They don't have a lot of the nasties we have. Mm-hmm. And I should mention the nasties real briefly. The vine weevil or root weevil, if you've got plants that have notches in the edges of their leaves, you've got them. It's not slugs, because slugs make holes in the center of the leaf. These are just like you cut out notches out of the sides of leaves. And the adult lays 300 eggs, one at a time, on different plants. And the grubs get in the ground and they chew up the rhizomes and the plant just collapses. It's not dead, mind you. It just collapses. And my secret is, in the middle of winter, I take a boiling hot kettle of hot water and I just pour it over the ground, because they're all on the ground. And that is a very organic way to take care of the little I won't use any words, but buggers. And the pieces that it ate, literally from the ground, from the roots up, those are sometimes lying on the ground. Sometimes you rake a heuchera, the whole top just falls right off. Then you've got them. So treat the whole, and then you can just go ahead and plug more. That the plants that have come off of that are usually doing just fine. You can just start 5 or 6 brand new plants. Just shove them in the ground. That has drainage.
And doesn't need drainage, Dan. So thank you for that advice. And we'll all be out there with an eagle eye for any signs of that weevil. And any other baddies we should be looking out for?
Not really. Occasional aphid. They don't care for them. Slugs don't eat them. Snails don't eat them. Deer will eat anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, get the fuzzy ones.
Yes, get the fuzzy ones. So thank you again so much, Dan, for sharing your passion for plants, your incredible storage of knowledge about heuchera in particular, and we're going to have you back on the podcast to talk about some of your other plant passions and collections.
Yay! Do some silver plants for you.
Yes, and we're looking forward to more heuchera introductions. Can I ask you maybe to end this with what you're looking forward to in the future for this plant family?
Believe it or not, cut flowers from heuchera. We've got some that are 36 inches tall. And if you've gone to Costco or any place to buy flowers lately, it's getting ridiculous, the cost of flowers, and how nice it is to have a plant that you can enjoy at home, enjoy the foliage, and use the flowers in a lovely vase. So that's something we're doing with a number of plants. Is I'd say if there's a trend, it's growing cut flowers, and just getting the bonus. It makes it a plant that pays the rent, right?
Yeah. And yeah, that's very interesting. I have cut some of those flower wands before and stuck them in a mixed arrangement, but haven't really thought of them as a cut flower crop.
Oh, and the other thing is the foliage. Mm-hmm. You can take a leaf and put it in water in an arrangement, and it will root in there. I mean, we're not talking months. We're talking years. It's just something. It'll never have a single shoot, but it'll have a whole big wad of roots. I potted one up, and if my wife hadn't dried it out, it would have lived another year. But they're beautiful foliage, and the Germans in particular have been using them in arrangements. They've been rolling them like roses, using it, with a little drop of hot glue and a stick. A lot of potential there.
Can't wait to see where that direction brings us. So, well, I want to say thank you again, Dan, for sharing your time, and we will have you back on soon.
Sounds great, Kath. Take care.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get softer, smoother, and more even-toned skin after just one use with the new Gentle Exfoliating line from Cetaphil. Formulated with a unique triple acid blend that promotes surface skin cell renewal, these gentle chemical exfoliators remove dead skin cells and refine skin's texture while hydrating, resulting in softer, smoother, more even-looking skin. Shop the new Cetaphil Gentle Exfoliating line in the face and body aisles at your local Target store or online at cetaphil.com.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Tithonia plant profile. Mexican sunflowers, Tithonia species, are an annual flowering plant that blooms in bright hues of orange, yellow, and red. The flowers resemble an open daisy and are more similar to marigolds and zinnias than to sunflowers, in my opinion. This fun annual plant attracts tons of pollinators to the garden, including bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. It's native to Central America and hardy to USDA zones 9 to 11. The plants grow 4 to 6 feet tall, so give them plenty of room. Water them in if there isn't enough rain when they are seedlings, but once mature, they are quite drought tolerant. You can fertilize and deadhead them occasionally to encourage repeat blooming, but it's not necessary. You may need to stake the plants if they are growing in a windy area. They do not tolerate sitting in wet soil, and powdery mildew is an issue if it's grown in climates with high humidity. Plant the seeds in late spring or early summer in a full sun spot with good drainage. They do well in containers, and dwarf varieties, such as Goldfinger, grow to just 2 to 3 feet tall, and they're perfect for this use. Tithonia is an extremely low-maintenance and rewarding plant. Be sure to save some seeds from this year's flowers to plant next year. Mexican sunflowers, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, my Hamamelis virginiana, also known as the fall witch hazel, is in full bloom. I love those sprightly little yellow flowers popping up all over the limbs of that tree. Over at the community garden, we dug the carrots that we planted last spring. They're a little past peak, a little bit woody, but actually still edible. Then we planted rows of radishes and carrots. I have to share some very sad news for our local horticultural community in the Mid-Atlantic, and that's about the passing of Stanton Gill. He was a guest on this podcast and a wonderful gentleman, a fount of horticultural knowledge, a teacher, a mentor to many. He is going to be greatly missed. In the garden tips that we shared this week on our social media, we recommended that you remove and destroy iris foliage, not to compost it, to eliminate the eggs of the iris borer from wintering over. And now is the time to switch out your summer annuals in containers and beds for cool season ones like mums, calendula, snapdragons, pansies, African daisies, violas, etc. If you want to gather the nuts, which are actually seeds, from the dropped ginkgo fruits you're finding, wear gloves. Not only is the fruit stinky, but the outer coating of the seed contains chemicals that can cause a dermatitis or a blistering rash similar to poison ivy. You'll want to bake the seeds before eating them. In local gardening events, the Franciscan Monastery Garden Guild is having their very first fall festival. That's going to be taking place Saturday, October 19th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The monastery is located in the Brookland neighborhood of Northeast Washington, D.C. They're going to have pumpkins, plants, herbs, bulbs, and their award-winning honey, which I find absolutely delicious and wish they made a lot more because usually it's sold out by the time I get there. So check out that event. It's family friendly, and they will be also offering tours of their vegetable garden and their 100-plus-year-old greenhouse. So you can go to the Arlington Cemetery for several tours this fall, and you can find out about them at arlingtoncemetery.mil. And the first one coming up is Friday, October 18th, and that's Memorial Arboretum Fall Color Tour from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. that Friday. And that will be, of course, looking at the fall autumn splendor colors and the 300 species of trees at the Arlington National Cemetery. They will also have a plant healthcare tour on Friday, October 25th, 9 to 11 a.m. as well. And then a shrub and perennial tour Friday, November 1st from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. If you go to any of these tours at the Arlington Cemetery, I highly recommend arriving at least a half hour ahead of time because the security screenings can have long lines, especially when there are school groups present. And then finally, there is a screening of Bird Walk, the documentary created by Cynthia Khabib. And Cynthia was a prior guest on the GardenDC podcast. And you can attend that screening at Brookside Gardens on October 22nd. It is a free event. It's at 11 a.m. and that is a Tuesday. And Brookside Gardens is located in Wheaton, Maryland. Happy gardening!
This is Christy Page with Green Prints with the last word on A Tale of Rosie, the Dog of Destruction, a story by Carolyn Mitchell Carrico. How, I exclaimed, surveying the aftermath as I opened my garden gate. Tomatoes split in half, flowers broken, and the notorious Dog of Destruction was mysteriously absent. Rosie, a brown mutt with ambiguous origin, became a part of our family 6 scorching Memphis summers ago. Originating from a friend's farm and known for her chicken-chasing escapades, Rosie found a new home with us, proving incompatible with smaller animals, but fitting in perfectly with our kids and Zeb, our older dog. Rosie, settling in late July, considered the garden her domain. Discovering a spot to dig under the fence, she ventured into the neighbors' yards. Realizing the need for a protective barrier, we installed a garden fence to safeguard both future vegetables and neighboring chipmunks. The first fence, a small metal one with a gate, aimed to keep toddlers and dogs away from the vegetable rows I planted and tended, always cautious to secure the gate. However, Rosie's determined spirit led her to breach the gate with her blocky head, necessitating a sturdier fence. The following year brought another fence, post holes, 4x4s in concrete, boards, and a heavy-duty gate. As our garden fences grew more elaborate, my vegetable plot became more systematic, yet the illusion of a canine-free haven shattered when I discovered split tomatoes and Rosie staring from the neighbor's side. My husband caught her red pod, effortlessly clearing the 3.5-foot fence. In desperation, we added extensions and lattice, creating a fence tall enough to deter even deer. Finally, we outsmarted the dog of destruction. An entire growing season passed without her breaching the defenses. However, unintended consequences emerged. The sanctuary, where our vigilant guardian couldn't harass the squirrels, had been created. My plants thrived, but the summer yielded not a single tomato for our family. In the end, Rosie's antics were no match for the impenetrable fortress we built to protect our garden. Yet the unexpected consequence was a peaceful haven for the neighborhood squirrels, leaving us with a bountiful garden but a tomato-less summer. Next year's garden plan will definitely reacquaint Rosie with the neighborhood squirrel population. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with #GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.